Welcome back. Neil has some key decisions to make regarding relocation. He's currently in Western Alberta, where land prices are at a premium for recreational property. So in order to maximize his resources, he needs to consider relocating elsewhere in Alberta or even Saskatchewan, or consider renting versus owning. We talked to Earl Smith about those decisions facing Neil.
Grow Partners is a farm and land management company. We manage farms in Saskatchewan and some in Alberta as well. Basically for people that own farmland but don't farm it themselves. And so we're constantly trying to put together young farmers looking for land with investors or people that own land looking for operators, and coming up with some unique business arrangements for those kinds of situations. The business plan is going to be key. Neil doesn't have a lot of equity. He's got some family support for sure, but he's going to need to look at other ways to source money, and so the business plan is key to get that done. So he needs to work it hard, and he needs to consider it a living document that continues to change as his situation changes. You're never done, would be my advice to him. And my other advice with Neil would be, make for sure you think about the personal side of that business plan. So the business plan basically tells your investors or your lenders what you want to do. But the other part of that is, do you have what it takes to do it, and what's your background experience?
A good business plan are some sound financial ratios, and having been an ag banker for many years, can you give us an idea of what should be in there and why are those ratios important?
Well, I think they're really important, especially a guy like Neil that's going to have to use quite a bit of leverage one way or another. He really needs to understand his risk, and my advice to him would be to be really careful. He needs to borrow some money, obviously, and he needs to buy land. I think it's important that he owns some land, because that's where he's going to build his equity. But he needs to be careful. A sharp young guy like him with a good business plan can probably borrow more money than he should. Having come from the financial services, I know that the banks are good at analyzing risk, but at the same time they're analyzing their risk. So they can look at the security that's there and make for sure they've got a fallback position. My advice to Neil would be to make for sure he understands those numbers really well and understands what his fallback position is. Just because you can borrow the money doesn't mean it's what you should be doing at that particular point in time. And what I think is the key to keeping on top of that are those financial ratios. And there's dozens of them you can use in any business or on a farm. I think it's important to zero in on 3 or maybe 4 key ones that are meaningful to you, and understand them and understand the trends. And that's, I think, what a lot of farmers miss when looking at financial ratios. It's a snapshot in time as to what those ratios are, but what are the trends? What's this one different from what it was last year? Is it going in the right direction? And over a few years, what are the trends? So the ones that I tend to focus in on, and I think they're simple and easy to understand, 3 of them, the current ratio, the debt to equity ratio I use, and there's a number you can of balance sheet type ratios you can use, and I like to look at the debt service capacity, so the ability to manage those debts. So on the current ratio, it's a very simple ratio, and as long as you're doing some financial statements or having financial statements done, you just look at your balance sheet. On the left, usually on most balance sheets, the left side is the asset side and the top is the current assets. So you want to look at the current assets on the balance sheet and compare those to the current liabilities. So basically that'll tell you how much cash is going to be cash or things that will become cash in the next 12 months versus how much cash you're going to need to service your debt and pay down your payables and revolve your operating line and that kind of thing. So you want to look at that ratio, and again, there are some guidelines, and if you can have $1 to $1 on the current asset side for every 50 cents, or you have on the current liability side, that's a really strong position. You can squeeze that to even up to $1.25 on the asset side to $1 on the liability side, as long as that's a positive number. Current ratio is an interesting ratio, but using those same numbers, you can also get to working capital, which is just subtracting the current liabilities from the current assets. Make sure that's a positive number and that is big enough, because you can have a ratio that looks okay, but the numbers aren't large enough. So two things to look at there on the balance sheet in terms of
well, working capital is certainly important. You looked at Neil's situation, which we talked about before, and you've had some 4 recommendations with regarding to how he should manage his equity in terms of the land relocation issue. Can you just highlight what those were?
Sure. I think that's, as I said, a really good move for Neil to change where he's running his operation from. The program that I think could help him a lot in Alberta is the AFSC Young Farmers Program. That's a great program, and he should be checking into that. So what he needs to balance is he better off? Can he find land in Alberta that will give him what he needs in terms of price and affordability, and access that program to acquire it? Because if he goes to Saskatchewan, he may find cheaper land, but he may not have access to the better program there. Or likely won't, so he needs to balance those two things out.
You've also mentioned to him that looking at some land rental agreements.
Well, sure. I mean, I guess I simplify that a lot and say if you don't have enough money of your own to get where you want to go in a business, then you got to use somebody else's. There's a couple of ways to do that. One is borrowing money, obviously, and that's been the traditional way we access capital in agriculture, is we either use our own equity or we borrow money from a bank. And what I want farmers to think more and more about is how do they use somebody else's equity, because equity shares risk with you. And a simple land rental agreement is a way to share equity, or a way to use someone else's equity, particularly if it's in some sort of a production-based shared arrangement. We do a lot of joint venture agreements on cropland. I've got one of them on a cattle operation as well. They work really well because it's the younger farmer needing to use somebody else's money can create a joint venture with somebody that has land and or cattle. They share the risks, they share the profits. The young fellow gets to contribute his labor and his expertise and get ahead that way. So I really encourage Neil to, once he gets settled, to start seeking those things out. The old share agreements on cow herds would be a great way for Neil to grow a herd where somebody else owns the cows and he provides the facilities and the feeding and the labor and gets a share of the calf crop. There's no risk there, or he's managing his risk really well under those scenarios. So really encourage that. And he's very fortunate that demographics are going to work for him. The demographics are great because we got this whole baby boomer generation in farmers as well. There's going to be lots of farmers retiring. Not all of them want to just see their life's work get sold at the auction sale. They're looking for young guys, and they don't always have kids that are either interested in the farm or have any inclination toward it. If you can find the right match there, where you match Neil up with somebody that's ready to slow down and retire, that's prepared to give him a leg up and work with him, I think that's a great opportunity. And we haven't done a lot of that in agriculture. We sort of say, well, when you're done farming, if your kids don't take over, you have an auction sale and it's gone. And I'm encouraging older farmers to say, hey, wait a minute, let's look around for maybe there's another way to do this, and have a business succession plan for the farm that doesn't include your kids. And we've been working on a concept we call microfinancing, where you start to see that opportunity. Because when the retiring farmer sells his farm, ends up with a bunch of cash, he's looking for something to do with that money, and so maybe it ends up in the stock market, and that's not something he's maybe very familiar with. And we'd like to create opportunities for farmers to invest back in the industry and ranchers back in the industry that got them where they are. And you start to think about the potential of taking a young guy like Neil that's got passion, he's got business sense. He's low on equity, but he'd make a great young partner for a farmer that wants to see his farm become a legacy and carry on to another generation and not be split up and and be part of growth. So pretty exciting times, I think, and the demographics, as I said, are working for Neil really strong. You just got to get aggressive and get out there and find them.
When we come back, we'll examine some tax strategies available to Neil.